Thank you for joining us for this month's Vertical IQ Industry Focus, where we look in detail at various sectors of the national economy, highlighting those industries that are doing well and those where the reality is less bright. Industry Focus is presented by Vertical IQ's chief economist, Ingo Windsor. Ingo was the founder of Local Market Monitor, is a graduate of MIT and Boston University, and he's not your typical economist. He presents data from a very practical business perspective and doesn't mind avoiding cautious conclusions. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Ingo.
Thank you very much, Julie. Every month, we look at industries in a specific sector of the economy, how they're doing, and how they may be affected by national developments. Our focus this month is on the healthcare sector, which provides 1 out of every 7 jobs in America and takes 1 out of every 5 consumer dollars. It's been the fastest growing part of the economy for years and is the main reason the economy right now is still in positive territory. So let's have a look at that economy, first in the form of gross domestic product. Even though the headlines claim GDP grew at a 4.3% rate in the third quarter of 2025, that's only compared to the previous quarter. It's not really a good way to measure sustainable growth or to see trends that help us figure out the future. One better way is to compare GDP with the same quarter of the previous year. That's what we're looking at here. And what we see is that the recent growth of GDP is closer to 2% than 4%. And in addition, there seems to be a slowing from earlier 3% rates. I still have problems looking at the economy only through GDP, however, because the calculation measures not just consumer spending, but also the level of business inventories and the volume of imports, which have nothing to do with real growth. In addition, GDP tells us nothing about the levels of debt that consumers have taken on to support the spending that is the main pillar of the U.S. economy. Adjusted for inflation and not even counting mortgages, it's at a record $15,000 for every man, woman, and child in the U.S., or $60,000 for a family of 4. I think a better way to judge the basic health of the economy is to look at the rate at which it's creating jobs. Jobs means consumers, and consumers are the economy. Here's the picture of job growth in the last 2 years, showing the increase in jobs each month compared to the same month of the previous year. Growth has been slowing for a while and at a faster pace in recent months. Let's quickly see what that's happening. Even though healthcare is our focus, we have to see it relative to the rest of the economy. Job growth has come to a halt in the construction sector. Jobs continue to disappear in the manufacturing sector. Growth is slow in the finance sector and in retail. Restaurants are providing some new jobs. But there's been no growth in the big business services sector that often measures actual business activity. And there have been job losses in the government sector, mainly at the federal level. And now let's get to our focus. Following the trend, there's even been a slowdown in the growth of healthcare, the only major sector that has steadily created jobs in the last few years and that continues to carry the economy. This all by itself is not an encouraging sign. Unless we can export healthcare, it's just a transfer payment from one group of people to another, not a driver of general economic growth. So let's see which parts of the healthcare sector are providing new jobs and which ones aren't. Doctors' offices are creating jobs at a good and steady clip, 3% a year. This is due to increases in support staff rather than in the number of doctors. Dentist offices, on the other hand, are not doing as well. And the growth of other health practitioners, optometrists, chiropractors, physical therapists, mental health counselors, has steadily slowed in the last 2 years. The trend has been especially bad for chiropractors. At general hospitals, the growth in jobs has been high and steady. At psychiatric and substance abuse hospitals, on the other hand, growth has dropped dramatically. At skilled nursing facilities, where you might be taken after surgery, job growth remains high, even though it's lower than a couple of years ago. But at long-term nursing homes and assisted living facilities, growth has slowed rapidly. It's even worse at outpatient care centers that provide kidney dialysis. And at HMO medical centers. And there's been a very dramatic change in home health care, one of the fastest growing parts of the healthcare sector. Home healthcare is a good example of the economic dynamics that shape the healthcare industries and that can affect all of its parts. First, the success of any healthcare business depends largely on third-party payers, whether they cover a particular medical treatment and how much they pay for it. That includes Medicaid and especially Medicare, the reference point for many private health insurance plans. Success also depends on relative cost. As hospitals became more expensive, cheaper forms of treatment like outpatient clinics expanded rapidly. But as costs for those clinics also rose, new approaches like home health care became more popular. But lower costs in healthcare often means jobs that pay less. That's true at doctors' offices, where support staff now do a lot of what doctors used to do, and especially in home healthcare, which has the lowest wages in the healthcare sector. Low-wage jobs are often filled by immigrants, legal or otherwise, and it's easy to associate the sudden drop in the growth of home healthcare with new government policies towards immigrants. Any and all of these factors can affect the success of any healthcare business, with government actions at the top of the list, which means that such changes can be sudden and may not be permanent. Because of this and the high and rising costs, healthcare today is still a growing industry, but a less stable one. Let's finish with social services, which are not healthcare, but which deal with a lot of the same issues. Note the spike in family and disability services just after the drop of home healthcare services, when people can't get even minimal healthcare. And note the drop in childcare, where low wages are the norm. That's it. In this time of uncertainty, it's important for bankers and investors to stay on top of developments that affect the fortunes of the businesses they serve. Vertical IQ provides the data and analysis they need with detailed industry profiles in 330 metropolitan markets. Thanks very much for following along. This is our Vertical IQ industry focus. I'm Ingo Windsor.